Ron Brooks lost his eyesight while he was playing a pickup basketball game with friends when he was 14 years old. Now, as a 30-year veteran of the public transit industry, Ron is a sought-after expert for his work to make public transportation more accessible and inclusive for everyone. And drawing on both his professional and lived experience, Ron teamed up with Kristen Joyner, one of the transit industry's foremost experts in the areas of event planning, marketing, and training, to co-author a brand new book, All Aboard, Conducting Accessible Community Involvement for Public Transit. And today I speak with both of them, Ron and Kristen, about the book and why it's important, why public transit agencies should focus on it. It's a great look at what transit agencies need to be focused on. In the middle of everything else, we need to make sure that the customers we serve, all of them, have access to our meetings as well as our service and to opportunities to speak up and have their voice heard. Ron Brooks is a graduate of Indiana University and a 30-year veteran of the public transit industry. He is the founder and CEO of Accessible Avenue, and he is the Senior Director for Policy and Stakeholder Engagement for USERV, a transportation network company adapted to meet the needs of people with disabilities. Kristen Joyner is the founder of KJ Backpack, LLC, and a 35-year veteran of the public transit industry who leads with creativity, energy, and enthusiasm. And you'll hear and see all of that on display in today's episode of Transit Unplugged as we talk with both of the authors about their brand new book. So happy to have on our podcast today two of my good friends, Ron Brooks and Kristen Joyner, who have recently written a book called All Aboard, Conducting Accessible Community Involvement for Public Transit. Thank you both for being on the show today to talk about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
We were all together just recently at the APTA conference, Transform in Anaheim, and I know you all did a book signing there. That's always fun to do that. And very excited for you, my friend Ron, to have this first book out. Tell me some about the book and why did you write it?
Well, I have spent my entire career, 30 years, involved in public involvement in one way or another. And I've spent my entire life as an adult involved in the disability community. So I've really sat on both sides of what I would consider the community involvement table as it relates to people with disabilities. And a couple of things that I know just from that experience. One is that just about everybody in the public transit industry wants to engage with the disability community. They want to get feedback from the community. They want to hear what the community's needs are, and they want to do the right thing. I also have experience from the community's perspective that sometimes it doesn't work right, either because the folks who represent the agency or the agency's provider isn't hearing what the community's trying to say, maybe the right people aren't at the table, or sometimes the process itself isn't as accessible or as inclusive as it needs to be. So I really wanted to write this book initially because I wanted to help the industry do a better job at designing community involvement processes that reach the right people, that land right for the community so that the community feels welcome and heard, and that are accessible, that really address the needs of the people that we're trying to connect with. Because I personally believe, and I think we as an industry believe, that we are better when we hear and incorporate the voices of the people that we serve. So to me, this book was really just a way to bring the sides of this conversation together so that we can have that dialogue and have that relationship that really gets us to where we want to be anyway.
This book actually comes on the heels of a project that Ron and I did about 10 years ago for Southwest Transit Association. It was a guidebook for transit associations and how they put together their association meetings. So it started with a little booklet, a little guidance, but we have learned over time that there are processes that can be so much better if you listen to all the voices involved. And that was really important to us to focus on particularly people with disabilities.
So, Kristen, is this book then designed for transit agencies who want to have public meetings, but they want to make sure that people with disabilities have full accessibility? Is that what it is? It's an actual real guide?
Yes, it is a true practical guide. And the nice thing about it is while it's not checklists, we don't want to focus on checklists.
Okay.
It does have very practical step by step. How do you do your outreach so that you're more inclusive? And what do you need to have on site? It's things that when you read the book, you go, oh, yeah, that makes total sense. But we fail to stop and not only think about it ourselves, but we fail to ask others. Okay, if you are unable to see a presentation screen, or you're unable to sit in a very crowded room with a lot of noise, it's very distracting to you. What can we do to make this situation better so that we can hear your voice and hear what your needs are?
Ron, I remember when I was at WMATA, Washington Metro, with Christian Kent was the associate administrator at the time, and I was working for a contractor running the day-to-day services. Mm-hmm. But twice a month, I would go to public meetings, riders advisory meetings, where the people who rode our service, and this was an ADA accessible service, that's what we were running. I wasn't responsible for day-to-day fixed route. I was responsible for day-to-day paratransit. Is that who this book is for? People who are running day-to-day paratransit to make sure that and fixed route, to make sure they can hear from people who need it? Is that the problem we're trying to solve?
I think that's part of the challenge that this book is there to solve. And I think that people who are providing accessible transit and paratransit services are part of the audience for this book. But I think it's actually a little bit broader than that.
Okay.
In fact, the thing that really made me think about this book was not my work in accessible transit and paratransit. It was actually the work that I've done with a lot of projects when I was working a few years ago for a transit agency. Actually, it was Valley Metro out in the Phoenix metro area here where I live. And we were doing a lot of rail expansion at the time. We were designing projects which are actually still being built. Some of them have come online since then. But as part of every capital project, there are public engagement requirements. Yeah, there's reviews, to figure out the alignment of the project, impacts on neighborhoods. There's reviews at different stages in the design process. Yeah, all sorts of engagement with the community. And we spent a lot of effort trying to figure out how to make those processes more accessible for the community that we were serving. There's also the work that we do around service planning. When we need to change our routes or restructure our services, there's public engagement requirements as part of that work. And even if there's not a public engagement requirement, there's a public engagement need. And making sure that we're hearing from the entire public as part of that process makes that process work better. It also makes it a little easier when we get to our board, because there's a better chance that we'll have better community buy-in. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking about the work that I've done with advisory committees like you talked about. I was thinking about board meetings, because I've certainly spent time in board meetings where the community is not very happy and, or they don't feel like they're being heard. And so I would say the audience for this book is broad. It's anybody who is involved in public engagement work, working with supporting boards and committees, service planning, capital planning, accessibility. All of those
yes,
need to have some engagement with the public.
And Paul, I have talked to several transit agencies, rural transit agencies, who have been in business 20, 30 years. And every week they get calls saying, do you provide transit service for people with a disability? And so part of this also, the outreach continues to keep transit in a community top of mind. With CCAM and things that are coming on board for more community involvement and more cross-sectional involvement, it's going to be important that we are engaging with all of the partners in the community so that transit story can be told and so that we're doing a better job of partnering. I think that's a piece of this as well.
One last audience. As our industry, because one of the areas that we're focused on is being more inclusive in our employment practices. as we engage and hire and bring in more people with disabilities into our industry, those people are going to need to go to trainings. They're going to be going to events like APTA and SWATA and state association meetings and events. And a lot of this book talks about events, not just meetings, but conferences. And how do you make meal functions more accessible? And that's all based on my experience and work that we've been doing within organizations like APTA and SWATA for years to try to address those kinds of challenges. And so I think there's a little bit for everything here.
Hey, sorry to interrupt the show, but I know if you're listening to this podcast, you'd be interested in this. Did you know that Transit Unplugged has a newsletter? That's right. Every week we put out a great, colorful graphic newsletter, which showcases our behind the scenes of our podcasts and of our TV show, Transit Unplugged TV, and of our weekly News Minute, and all the hot things happening in the world of Transit Unplugged. Be sure to subscribe. You can go right now to our website at transitunplugged.com. Put in your email address, and you'll get once a week a great newsletter from Transit Unplugged where you can follow us and see everything we're doing behind the scenes and be really a part of our community. Obviously, in the book, you describe different types of disabilities, right? It may not be just visual. It may not be just somebody in a wheelchair. There's all kinds of disabilities. Can you explain why that's important as it relates to community outreach?
And yeah, first off, and I do want to just acknowledge we had a couple of contributing authors as well. And if you find out in the book, these people, we brought in folks who have really strong disability experience in the disability community, not maybe in transit, but just in general, because we wanted to get the details right. First off, 25% of Americans have some sort of a disability, but the number's actually probably a little higher than that because a lot of people, as they get older, they have health conditions that really are similar to disability. For example, by the time you're in your 60s, 30% of us have hearing impairments.
Yep.
That count as hearing impairments, but
That's
we
right.
may not think of ourselves as being disabled. We just don't hear as well as we used to. What we wanted to do was to make sure we captured all of the kinds of challenges that people face and the different ways that people engage with the environment, because it isn't just one size fits all. There's things that we can do that support people with all sorts of different communication styles, with all sorts of different abilities as it relates to the things you think about, hearing, seeing, walking, et cetera, but also people with different types of styles of learning, people with different types of neurodiversity. Where do people land in terms of how they communicate, how they learn, how they listen, how they process information. We really tried to catch all that.
Specifically, the chapter in the book that deals with that, it's called Implications of Disabilities for Community Engagement. So it goes into specifics of deafness and hearing loss, intellectual disabilities, mental health, autism, like Ron said, neurodivergence. It explains what those are, but then it gives very specific bullet points about how or why someone with a particular disability might miss a direction and how someone in the transit space can help connect the dots and help them understand better. So it's very specific like that.
You also have some chapters focused on in-person and virtual meetings, which we do a lot of these days. Can you talk about 2 or 3 things that a transit agency or any organization can do, to make those spaces work well for people with disabilities?
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on that one first because it's one of my favorites. That we have several examples in there. Everything from how you set up the room, leading space for someone who might be in a wheelchair, but not just put them at the back of the room, have spaces throughout the room. But here's one of my favorites, Paul, and you're going to really love this. You always have the person in the meeting that wants to comment, and they holler from the back of the room, "You can hear me from back here, right? My voice is loud enough, isn't it?" And everybody is thinking, well, yeah, but it's really annoying. So a simple fix is to make certain that everybody has access to a microphone, and which means you might need to have a runner in the room that takes a microphone to someone. And then you have microphones on stands, but not just high up, but you have a low microphone for someone who's sitting in a wheelchair that wants to roll up to a microphone. And then other simple things might just be the font style that you choose. If there is someone with low vision and you have a lot of graphs and charts in your presentation, you need to take the time to stop and say, on the screen is a chart showing our increased ridership in this particular neighborhood and or increased population of people who speak a particular language in this neighborhood, and then explain even further what that looks like. So it's taking the time to be respectful of everyone in the room.
And I'll just touch on one other for the meetings and then talk about virtual, which, as you pointed out, we're doing quite a bit of. In one of the things that we learned, and I learned this at Valley Metro when we were doing a bunch of meetings with the community, is things like speaker cards and knowing where to go in a meeting to make a presentation or to talk to the board or whoever the audience was a barrier for people to participate. And just by having a couple of staff members in the room who could provide assistance, whether it was filling out a speaker card or grabbing a cookie for somebody so they didn't feel left out of the refreshments, made a big difference. In terms of virtual, a couple of things people don't realize is that there is currently not a single platform that's currently available in the market that makes the screen sharing accessible for somebody using a screen reader. So if you are presenting you're sharing your screen in a meeting, people who use assistive technology do not have that information. And there's a couple of fairly easy things you can do to make it more accessible. You can send a presentation out in advance, assuming that it's been created to be accessible, or you can just describe the presentation as you're presenting it. And it's little things like that that make virtual meetings more accessible. There's other things like giving people a break every 45 minutes to an hour. Those meetings can be long for all of us, but if you have a disability that makes it hard to pay attention for more than an hour, they're excruciating. Or if you're like me and you just want to get up and walk around for a minute, you can focus better in shorter blocks of time. So it's little things like that that can make those meetings work a lot better for a lot more people.
When you build a comprehensive and accessible public engagement plan, what should be the real goal for a transit agency?
I would say that the first and ultimate goal is to hear and to make sure that we're getting all of the voices of the people that we serve. We know that we make better products and we deliver better services when we hear and incorporate the voices of the people that we're serving. We know that. So the only goal is how do we hear and engage those voices? And I think ultimately another goal is to really bring more people into our workforce. We have, as you know, we have ongoing chronic and epic labor shortages. We've got a population that if we can engage them, they're interested. They will get more involved, and as they get more involved, they're going to become more and more a part of the solution. And I think that engaging the public really is a first step to making that happen. There's one other thing I'd like for people to learn from this book, and that is that the book has a lot of suggestions in it. Most of them are easy. A lot of them cost absolutely no money at all. Some of them cost a little bit of money. Very few of them are expensive. And these are things that just through careful planning and just thinking ahead are pretty easy to do. And you can get a lot of value for a little bit of effort. And we also know, Curb Cut being a great example, that when we design the stuff we do to be accessible for everyone with disabilities, the rest of the population also benefits. And so to me, this is really just a lot of easy stuff that you may not have thought about that will make your engagement processes work better across the board.
Paul, Ron and I, as we've talked about the book, there are three truly main points that we want to make. And One is that accessible community involvement benefits everyone. He just gave you an example of universal design and curb cuts. We believe that accessible community involvement, it should be practical, and it is practical. It's relatively easy to do. It doesn't need to be expensive or time consuming. And I think that we've given some good examples here, like change the font or provide a microphone or provide assistance in some way. Then the final one is accessible community involvement leads to better service outcomes and stronger community support. That really encapsulates what this book is about.
I also want to mention the names of your contributors, Ron, that you had mentioned that helped you. Mary Liz McNamara, Michelle Whitman, and a foreword by April Ray, who is the CEO of the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials. Great job in getting some big names to help you with the book.
Yeah, and I just want to underscore, Mary Liz and Michelle are experts in their own field. They've done some trainings in our industry around disability cultural awareness and inclusion, and we really brought them in for that kind of academic understanding of disability that was a little bit broader than what we typically have in the industry. So that was really helpful. And of course, April, I can't say enough about the work that COMTO is already doing to be more inclusive and more accessible for everyone. And it's a model that I would like to see all of us really pay attention to and follow as we move forward.
Do you mind if I share one quote from April's book? So this is something that April Ray wrote as part of the foreword. She says, "Please hear this. Wanting to do better is a commendable start. Acknowledging that the biggest room is the room for improvement puts us on a path to doing better. In the world of community engagement, listening is a highly prized skill. Considering varied perspectives offers fuller context and fuels idea innovation." I really love that she said, we all want to do better. And starting is great, but it's finishing well. The ADA itself is the floor, it is not the ceiling. And the ideas in this book that we're putting forward, they're the floor, they're not the ceiling. That's why we don't want it to be viewed as just a checklist. We want it to be viewed as a start for real improvement.
That's wonderful. And as transit agencies have made an extra effort to be more inclusive, this gives them a guide and a tool to make sure that their meetings, that their public events, and all engagement is made in a way which, just like your title says, so that everyone can get all aboard. I love that title. Conducting Accessible Community Involvement for Public Transit. It is available on Amazon and wherever you do get the book. I'd encourage you to read it and then review it. Give them a review that helps with the algorithms, and give them a good 5-star review and make a nice comment about the book and about the great authors. And that'll help us spread the word, right, Ron?
Oh, yeah, we definitely appreciate that. And we definitely want to get the word out. And that's a great start.
Yeah, it's available on Kindle, and we are getting ready to get it recorded, so it will be available as an Audible book.
Oh, that's great.
And Ron is working on a Braille version as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, both of you, Kristen and Ron, thank you so much for being our guest today on Transit Unplugged. This truly is, I think, a key part of what we're doing as an industry, making sure that everyone can get all aboard.
Thank you.
Thank you to Ron Brooks and Kristen Joyner for being guests on the show today. I'm Tris Hussey, editor of the podcast, and coming up next week, we kick off Season 8. As always, we make the season premieres something special, so we've brought you a CEO Roundtable with TfL's Andy Lord, Dottie Watkins of Cap Metro, Dwight Farrell of SMART in Detroit, Sean Donaghy of North County Transit, and Adam Leishman of Ascendal Group in Hong Kong. We know you'll enjoy this compelling discussion about the present and future of public transportation around the world. Transit Unplugged is brought to you by Modaxo. At Modaxo, we're passionate about moving the world's people, and at Transit Unplugged, we're passionate about telling those stories. So until next week, ride safe and ride happy.